Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at how we can actually do some work with moving within a 2D array using Java. This will work, of course, with basically any language. We're talking Java specifically as we look at this. So when we're talking about the directions of working within movement inside a 2D array, we have up, down, left, and right, because those are the directions we're talking about, of course, because that's a two-dimensional thing, up, down, left, right. When we want to move up, we've got to check for row minus 1. I want to make sure that row minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0 because the 0th row is the first row that we have availability access. So you want to make sure every time we're checking on that, to go on that, we have a test against 0. When we're going down, row plus 1 is what we're looking at. We want to see if our row plus 1 is less than grid.length. When we're talking about this, because length is the maximum number of values, so we have to make sure we're less than that because the number of rows, 8, the last row will be 7. So we have to make sure that row plus 1 is less than 8, aka 7, when we're talking about that. Now, if we're going to go left, aka we're going to move down the number line, again, the same approach, call minus 1, because when we're talking about 2D arrays, calls are how we talk about the left-right directionality, and call minus 1 has to be greater or equal to 0. Notice this is just like going up inside the 2D array, though when you're talking about the test, it's greater or equal to 0 when you're looking at that. Again, we have to use the greater than or equal to when we're talking about the left or the up, because 0 is a valid answer, or value, whatever, when we're talking about what we're doing inside a 2D array. Finally, if we want to go right, we want to check to make sure that call plus 1 is less than grid sub 0.length, or if we get more specific, grid sub row.length, because we always want to make sure that we're going within the bounds of this. And since we always have rectangular arrays in class, grid sub 0.length is guaranteed to be valid, but if you want to get more correct, it would be grid sub row.length. And so that's the directions we have to check if we want to go up, down, left, or right. Now, if we want to go actually do the validity checks, we want to make sure when we're checking 2D validity, we do our math first and our content after. When we talk about movement inside a 2D array, it's really, really critical that we do our math first. We check that we have valid math, and no matter how complex our math may be, we make sure we check that first, and then we do our content afterward. We have a sample if block right here. So if row minus 1 is greater or equal to 0, so I'm trying to go up, like this one up here. So I wanted to check to see if I can go up, so make sure I check the math first, then I check the content. Grid sub row minus 1 sub call equals whatever happens to be there. I don't even care what it is, because that's not what it matters. I want to check to make sure that I have a valid math test before I do my content check. Now this can be done in a couple different ways. We have it right here where I have a single if block right here, or I could have nested if blocks where I have this if block and then if block inside it for my content check as well. It depends on the logic we're working with, which would be the best option. But again, we have to make sure we do our math first, content after. And again, when we're talking about directionality inside a 2D array, we want to go up, it's row minus n, or row minus 1. That 1 just happens to be the current, if we're just going one value. It'd be row minus n if we're talking about some random radius. We want to look, say, for example, we're looking for a range of values. Same thing right here with row plus 1, making sure row plus n is less than some length. Call minus n is greater than or equal to 0, and call plus 1 is less than grid sub 0.length. Because again, when we're talking about a 2D array, we have to make sure we're not going outside of bounds first before we actually check the content of it inside it. And that's how we want to make sure we do directionality and valid checking inside a 2D array. Cheers.